We're going to call this meeting to order at 1:08. This is actually the superintendent's workshop, and I apologize for beginning 8 minutes late. We were having some difficulties with signing on to Teams, but today is Tuesday, April 28th, 2020, and it is 1 p.m., and we are meeting in the Joanne Idolette Teacher Education Center. At this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Moore for the series of presentations, but I would like to draw attention to the fact that we do have 3 board members that are joining us via Teams, and then Mrs. Justice and I are here, and then we have Mrs. Diagresta and Dr. Moore, and then many of see Brandon in the background, who is our technical coordinator that's going to be helping us throughout the meeting. And then because of the coronavirus, we're trying to maintain only 10 individuals in the room at a time. So Dr. Moore will be calling in staff members one by one so that they can present to the board. At this time, Dr. Moore, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the chair, board members, we have a number of items that we'd like to present today that will be coming to you for full approval in an upcoming business meeting, whether it be this evening or in future meetings. The first item is going to be handled by our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, Mr. Richard Meyer. The item is an amendment to the 2019-2020 dual enrollment agreement with Indian River State College. Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, Superintendent Dr. Moore. Madam Chair, this item is brought to the board. It will be brought to the board for approval tonight. It is an amendment to the 2019-2020 Indian River State College dual enrollment agreement that we need to make due to the response to COVID-19. So as the current agreement with IRSC states, students have to have met they have a variety of options to take the PERT, the SAT, the ACT before enrolling in one of the courses. Unfortunately, many of our students were scheduled to take one of these in the past few weeks where that opportunity did not exist. And so what we've come together with IRSC to do is to allow these students to begin their pathway for dual enrollment, start earning college credit only in one specific course. We think that they will be successful in the student success course as long as they have the 3.0 unweighted GPA. And so the requirement for the PERT, the ACT, or the SAT is waived just for the summer term. So these students can begin this pathway as they had already scheduled. They will not be able to enroll in other courses, sort of the higher level courses that we want to make sure they're prepared to take, unless they do have the opportunity to take the ACT, SAT. So really this is sort of just targeting our students who are very, very much beginning their pathway with dual enrollment and giving them an opportunity to do that in a virtual environment. And so that is the amendment, Madam Chair.
Okay. Anything further?
We'd be happy to answer any questions by any board members. If not, we'll move to the next item.
All right. This was an item that we were briefed on, but if anybody has any follow-up questions, I do not see any. Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Meyer, for that, but your job here is not done, sir. We still have the amendment to the 2019-2020 student progression plan. Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Madam Chair, this amendment also is in response to the COVID-19 situation. As we have briefed the board, and as I know you're all aware, the Department of Education has waived a number of testing requirements placed upon our students for the remainder of the school year, as well as certain requirements around graduation and promotion to 3rd grade. So what the board does is we like to incorporate all of the statewide requirements into what we call our student progression plan, and in order to make sure that anyone who looks at that student progression plan is aware of the changes, we are proposing what we have called here Amendment A, which addresses the specific instances within the 1920 student progression plan where those changes necessitated by the Department of Education's emergency order take place. The very vast majority of these are not things that I think warrant further discussion. They're state statutes that the district complies with and ensures that we have our students meet. So we can discuss those. I can answer any questions that you may have, Madam Chair, about those. But honestly, a lot of it is just, reactionary to the state policy, just to make sure we're in alignment in our documents. The one portion of this that I did want to ensure during the individual briefings and want to highlight once again during this presentation for the board to take careful consideration of is the amended semester grade chart. This is where the board does have that autonomous responsibility, that opportunity as a district to be best by kids and to look at how we're grading and how we're assigning grades in the school district of Indian River County. And so one of the considerations that we had, Madam Chair, was that, with the cancellation of the EOCs, it created a situation where there was a possibility where some students would have to take a final exam where other students wouldn't. And the state requires us to, formally, I guess I should say, requires us to count those EOCs as 30% of the grade. A similar metric was used for those final exams. We met with teachers, we met with department chairs, we met with administrators, and for a variety of reasons, making the recommendation that we will not have semester exams and that we will have this modified grading scale. We think that, like I said, I could go on and on about why it's best by kids, the stress that they're under right now, the inequities possibly that exist between students. I believe the district is doing a phenomenal job, but just putting that additional stress on them in these next few weeks, I think that we can definitely go with this grading scale, and it's going to be best by kids. So that is one place that the board will be acting sort of differently than other boards across the state in the adoption of this. And so just recognizing that this is coming to the board for approval this evening, be happy to answer any questions and have any discussion around this item.
Okay, great, thank you. One thing I want to do real quick is I want to jump back with Mrs. Rosario. She did have a question on the dual enrollment agreement, I believe. Mrs. Rosario, you can ask that question, and then Mrs. Berenborg and Dr. Schiff have a question about the student progression plan.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question about both, actually, but I will start with the first page it's the school board memorandum. It's just a question. Dr. Moore and I discussed it briefly. It's not about the content, but there is an X by strategic plan goals, and I know that this is a form that is requested of the superintendent when anything is being presented, that all of whatever items have been checked off are items that leadership is addressing. But for strategic plan goals, it says need to provide. Are we going to provide that, or is it going to remain need to provide?
I'm trying to follow along the first page. When you...
Yeah, I don't know if it's the first page. It's this page here. I don't know if you can see it.
So it's not, it's the memorandum, it's not the addendum, it's not the actual dual enrollment agreement, it's one of our forms that I'm looking for?
Exactly, yeah.
Insurance.
Just when we have public records, if somebody were to request this as a public record, would we be able to put in there which strategic plan this memorandum would fall under, or this topic?
Go ahead.
So through the
Does that
chair,
make sense?
as we discussed, I believe that is an item that we have in place, so I can review and to see that it is connected. Moving forward, which is part of the conversation I'm looking forward to having today regarding the strategic plan, that is the intent, that we have a decision-making process that connects the decisions in which you are charged as a board to make, that support the implementation of our strategic plan. We have an obligation as staff to provide information to the school board in making decisions when we're using or spending funds that ensure that the use of those dollars do connect and support the implementation of our strategic plan. I think we're in a unique place today in starting a very very innovative conversation as we begin the dialogue between the board, myself, and staff regarding the development of what will be our enhanced and modified strategic plan. So you will see that form continue to modify or develop, and it will drill down very specifically to the goal, the strategy, the action step, depending on the agreed upon structure as to what item that's coming before you, how it connects ultimately to our defined and agreed upon strategic plan.
Okay.
Thank you. Madam Chair, should I just continue with my question on the progressive plan, or are you going to go with the other?
I'm going to go with Mrs. Berenborg, Dr. Schiff, and then I can come back to you on that. Okay?
Thank you.
And then
Yes,
Mrs.
ma'am.
Justice. Okay? Mrs. Berenborg?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for this thorough report. I didn't get mine until 11 o'clock this morning, so it's hard to kind of go through it all quickly. I did see a text version of that earlier in the week. I will say thank you to everybody for being so flexible, seeing that we don't have these exams. Again, I have stressed my concern about students that were counting on the exams to help bring up their grades, and that teachers would be allowing them to do an extra project or something else in order to help with their grades. So I just wanted to say thank you for being flexible and helping kids to be able to do that. So I know it's unusual circumstances, but I appreciate all the flexibility that's gone into creating this. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Schiff?
Yeah, thank you. I want to just surface a couple of things about the amended semester grade chart. Mr. Meyer and I did have a conversation about this, but I want to also bring it up publicly. There are some things on the chart that may look like they don't make sense, and I want to give Mr. Meyer an opportunity to explain these. Specifically, on the chart, an A plus and an A plus comes out to an A, but a B and an A comes out to an A. A B plus and a B plus comes out to a B. A lot of that does not seem consistent. So I want to give Mr. Meyer an opportunity to explain why it's done that way, and why the combination of a B and a C plus is a B, but the combination of a C and a B is also a B, and just kind of go through a little bit how all that works so that people understand it.
All right, yes, thank you, Dr. Schiff, and through the chair, I appreciate the opportunity to explain this, and thank you for reminding me. I remember having that conversation. I do think it is warranted to explain this. So you will notice on the right side the quarter grade and the GPA points that are assigned to it. This grading scale is not uncommon to other districts and to other educational institutions where an A plus is given sort of a quarter bump, the A is given the 4, so on and so forth, right? And so when you take those grades and you put them across the top and you put them, you know, along the side and you add the 2 grade points together, divide by 2, and then round it, that's what you would get, you know, another number, which we have converted just into the A's, the B's, the C's, the D's, and the S. And the reason for that is that the NCAA and other organizations don't recognize the plus system. So it is not an uncommon system across educational institutions. However, for scholarship purposes, we wanted to make sure that our conversions at the end of the semester result in something that is admissible. So that's where you would see that you know, another way that we discussed doing it, just to describe how this would work and why the numerical rationale behind it. Sort of picture the A plus, and there's another chart that goes with this that I apologize for not being in here, the grade range, which is in the current student progression plan. That's why it's not in this amendment. When you're doing like a numerical grade, it would be like a 99, right? Divided, you know, added with a B, and the B range being between 80 and 87. When you add those up, you would still get the A because it's, you know, numerically the average there. But we convert it to a letter grade first before averaging. That's the way that the school district of Indian River has been doing things in the past. So we maintain that consistency here just for this semester. It is something we could probably open up and discuss a myriad of different methodologies, Madam Chair, over the summer for next year moving forward, but for consistency purposes for this, just making it through the COVID-19, I think that our administrators, our guidance counselors, our teachers, our students, our parents understand this with the absence of the semester exam. So there are, of course, ways to discuss how other educational institutions are doing it. This system is just a slight modification of what the school district has historically been doing without the exam. Dr. Schiff, does that cover kind of what we had talked about before? Is there anything else that you'd like me to hit on from that?
No, I think your explanation specifically of how the numerical grades are calculated into the letter grades and how that's consistent with other districts in the state is very helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we have Mrs. Rosario, then we have Mrs. Justice.
Thank you. I have a few questions. For, as a parent, reading this, it's very confusing. So I was wanting some, and Dr. Schiff talked a little bit about the way that these grades actually created, but do you hear an echo?
It's it's
It was a little
not
choppy.
good sound.
How about now? Is it better?
Yes.
Perfect now.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I started to hear an echo. So let me start off with the NCAA. The question with regard to the NCAA is, or the statement is, that they don't recognize pluses, right? A plus, B plus, C plus. If a student were to apply to a college and have an A plus or a B plus or a C plus on their transcript, what does the NCAA do with that grade? Do they just accept it as either A or B or C?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. So what other organizations do not accept the plus sign?
I don't know that I could give you that off the top of my head, but it's something we can certainly look into. Like I said, if we want to look at this policy moving forward for next year, that would be some data that I could pull to make that. But to be honest, I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay, because there's a lot of things this district has done previously and historically, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it was correct. I understand that there's a lot of things that we do when we make decisions. We research what our neighboring counties are doing, or maybe what other counties are doing statewide, and I get it. But much of the time, I would like for us not to follow. I would like for others to follow us. And I'm going to put on my headphones because I think I'm still hearing. Is that better for everybody? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And I would like for us not to always do what has been historically done. If we're reviewing this now, I don't understand why we can't change it now. Why do we have to wait a whole year? If it's effective now is the time to do it. And some of these, we have that opportunity. The A plus and the A plus should be A plus. If the NCAA doesn't accept it, then they'll accept the A. But it makes sense to have a B plus and a B plus equals B plus. Why can't we address this now?
Dr. Moore.
Well, I mean, we discussed some of, I mean, what you're saying, Mrs. Rosario, I completely agree with, as far as just because it's the way that things have always been done does not mean that that's the way we should continue to do them. And so there are a number of pieces of this that I would like to revisit at the appropriate time for next year, especially the cancellation of exams. I think that's one thing that we could, continue doing. But as far as the grading, we were only a few short weeks away from the end of the semester, and the consistency that I think that many people are looking for is why I would recommend simply amending the grading scale with the removal of the exams, and that being sufficient for this change without coming up with a lot of ideas. I'll be honest with you, I was the person in the meeting that was coming up with 2 or 3 different methodologies. I was going and asking the team, let's just average the grades out, right? Let's go away from this conversion policy and just say this percent plus this percent divided by 2, and that's what the grade's going to be. I went into that meeting, Ms. Rosario, thinking that I was going to try to lead the group to a big change like that, and to be honest, listening to the administrators, listening to the department chairs, listening to the teachers, listening to other district staff, make the recommendation that this change is enough right now. This is what we need. We need to give the teachers and the parents and the students the understanding that semester exams are canceled for the rest of the semester, and this is how grades are going to be done. I think that's my personal recommendation for this point. I don't want to disagree with you any more than that. I think that we should be bold and courageous and look for opportunities to make changes, but in this instance, I think this is enough of a solution to the COVID crisis at hand. Quite honestly, if, we weren't in this situation, this amendment wouldn't be coming forward. So, Dr. Moore.
Through the chair, just to
I can.
build on that.
Go ahead.
Laura. Thank you. I think twofold. A, Mr. Meyer touched on it, but I think it's worth reinforcing that this was a collective effort in which we worked with our teachers in the union really to problem solve regarding what is the current reality. And as he said, Mr. Meyer went in wanting with a desire of changing the world, which is part of the reason I was aggressive in recruiting him. Second, fully agree with the opportunities to evaluate what shifts in the student progression plan, which is policy, need to be shifted. And those are the conversations that we look forward to having in the future. The item that's in front of you here is just waiving certain pieces of the policy as a result of COVID-19 and the order in which we are under. To change the policy, which is the work moving forward, would be a different process that we would follow. This item is waiving certain pieces of the item or of the policy, which moves us through a temporary situation under executive order, which is what we are doing here.
When are we going to, in the future, when are we going to be able to discuss changing this for the future? Does this come back to us for the 2021 school year in a different progression plan?
Through the chair, I think that's part of the work that you have charged me with as your superintendent in identifying opportunities to organize ourselves in a way that allows us to maximize outcomes, support our teachers, invest in them, as well as our principals and administrators in school. A couple board meetings ago, pre-COVID-19, we had some significant dialogue regarding some of these issues, one of which Mr. Meyer just referenced, testing and the impacts of that. The other issues that were mentioned were the early release days, all part of things that we would need to negotiate, one of which falls within the student progression plan. And those are the conversations that we look forward to having. And it's just, here we are 2 months later, waiving the same thing in which I shared with the board that I wanted to begin to connect with our unions and have conversations in the next development of our pupil progression plan. And here we are waiving that same policy in which I want to address final exams, maximizing the opportunity for our teachers to conduct teaching and learning. And being sacred to that time, protecting that time, and maximizing that time for our students and our teachers was a priority that was established by this board, completely agreed with me. And, we will work towards that in the upcoming negotiations and in the development of this policy, student progression plan, which will come to you probably in the beginning of 2021.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
2001.
Thank you.
Mrs. Justice?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Moore addressed several of the things that I was going to mention. The last thing I would ask would be of Mr. Meyer or Dr. Moore. Often, we tend to make decisions and kind of lump all of our students together, but so many of our students, especially grade level and age-wise, have some differences, especially when we talk about mastery of a standard and pacing for next year, right? So as a parent, my biggest concern has been, how many standards are left? We'll take one kid. How many standards are left in math for this child A, this year? How will we ensure through iReady diagnostic, whatever we're doing, that he has mastered that standard so that he is able to start on grade level next year, ready to learn, or what will he need to review, right? What will we have missed that will need to be reviewed at the beginning of next year? So as a parent, that's kind of my thinking in working with teachers. Has there been any discussion regarding grades in lower levels? 3 years ago, when I got on this board, they changed the grades for elementary, especially it was like K1, 2. They just changed them. And they didn't really talk to anyone about it. It was a good idea. It was something that really focused on mastery and rather than, grades for a 6-year-old. So has there been some discussion about I know you really have empowered teachers and given them flexibility to reach their students and to identify mastery. is there some type of consultative practice we could put into place with parents, teachers, and students to be able to, if a student's able to demonstrate mastery, they're able to move on to some type of project-based learning, utilizing those standards or something like that? Because one of the things that I've been hearing from parents is, my kids have mastered some of these things. I'm having my child do things that they already know how to do. And obviously, right now, that's hard for every teacher with 18 students to be able to personalize it, and I'm seeing the way it's playing out. So, has there been some discussion as we move forward in making these types of changes to allow teachers flexibility to allow students to demonstrate mastery in some other way?
So through the chair, so you're gonna get me excited, Ms. Justice. I know I was just gonna present on this one item, and we're gonna, this is my wheelhouse, and I really, really appreciate that, but I'll try to be concise, because it's not about exactly this amendment, but it is, to your point, similar to this amendment, in that I believe that our grading should, and really state statutes are that we should be grading to ensure standards mastery. And to your point, this district did do some things in the past, which I was pleased to find when I got here, that we do have a methodology of reporting to parents the mastery of the standards. And even in focus at the higher grade levels, unlike other focus systems that I've seen across the state, we do reference the standard that's being taught. Now, I think the point of growth that we've seen is exactly what you alluded to, Ms. Justice, is that I don't know that we were monitoring individual student progress of the mastery of those standards so much as documenting them along the way so that there's a total picture. I think there is opportunity for growth there in the district next year. I think that would be a place to put this, to Dr. Moore's point, as we bring the 2020-2021 student progression plan, looking at ways to ensure that we are already utilizing the tools that some teachers are using, honestly, more effectively than others. And so there is that innovative space out there where some could probably tell you across the board, each and every one of their students where they've mastered. I think that's what we would want for every classroom, right? That's what every parent would want. That's what we want for every child. So kudos to those that laid the framework for that in the district. We're not in an awful place. I remember Dr. Moore saw this as, we have that. We have it to a degree, to your point, but it would be more useful to see that across the K-12 continuum instead of just in certain grade levels and in certain places.
So I wasn't talking about that, and let me just be more specific. I appreciate what you've said, and I understand it, and again, appreciate it. In this moment right now, recognizing that some of the decisions we make will have long-term repercussions, some won't. Some decisions will be made for this moment to handle a specific issue, right? And then that decision may never be made again, right? We may never waive EOCs again, but right now, that's what we do. Has there been some discussion for K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or could there be, should there be, as far as principal, teacher, parent conversation about where that child is and what the rest of the year looks like for that child? Because if a child has mastered the standards, or if a teacher has mastered the standards for the year, it has covered the standards for the year, and the child has demonstrated mastery, why is that child continuing to go down a learning path that isn't taking them and enriching their education? Because I still believe, much as we have a responsibility to serve the IEP, and to make sure that the IEP is addressed for each individual student, there are students who are on a gifted learning path who have an EP. And we have a responsibility to their education and to their parents to ensure that their education is enriching. So what I'm asking is, has there been any discussion between principal, and I'm not talking broad-based, I'm talking about principal, teacher, Dr. Moore, I say this with all due respect, right? Some parents are gonna be, we have some parents who are teachers. Let's just use that for example. A teacher's gonna be able to especially if you're an elementary school teacher and you have an elementary child, you're gonna be able to know where your child is probably fairly quickly, much quicker than I can, right? As a mom, just who doesn't have an education background. If that teacher is able to demonstrate that their child has covered the standards right now, has there been any thought to saying to that parent, teacher, principal, okay, this is how your child's learning, this is what your child's learning could look like for the rest of the year, rather than continuing on this? I mean, honestly, there is nothing worse than putting your kids on an iReady lesson where they have to learn about inference for the 15th time. As a parent, do you know what I mean? When you're hoping that your child's education is enriching, and it's not, as a mom, you want to do something about that, right? So that's the question.
So the simple answer to the question, the correct answer to the question is yes, that has occurred. Absolutely. The more complex answer would be, is it occurring in enough spaces that we would be proud of that? And the answer to that is no, we want for it to grow.
Okay.
And so, I think the first few weeks of the instructional provision plan, the focus and the concern was connectivity. Were we going to be able to make this work? We've proved that has been a great success. And so, yes, the conversation now is, what do the last few weeks look like? And what is that going to look like for each and every child? I think there's going to be, like I said, room for growth in certain spaces, some more than others. I think that some of the teachers feel very comfortable, and they're already doing this. And so to answer your question, that is occurring. And so it's a matter of how and who and where and do we coach to ensure this is going on for each and every student. But what I would say, once again, is that this situation, as awful as it is, really has been a great learning opportunity for us as educators to ask that very question that you asked, Ms. Justice, as, how am I monitoring student mastery of the standards throughout the year, instead of, to quote Dr. Moore, just be an issuer and collector of work? How am I really teaching, motivating, inspiring that child to master the standards, and then what do I do once they've mastered them? And so we have seen that innovation. We do have examples of excellence in this district. They're out there on social media. We're highlighting them. Just super proud of some of the things that are going on. But, I couldn't sit here and say it's happening in every space, but we're working on that. So it is exciting. So thank you for asking.
This is work. I have one last comment and then I'm done. There was an article that I shared and it said something about access for students isn't enough. And I would say that innovation and flexibility for teachers isn't enough without authority. And flexibility for principals isn't enough without authority. So while we empower these leaders, let's make sure that we give them the authority to be able to make some of these child-focused decisions.
Absolutely.
So just maybe as a closing point, or to build on the remarks by Mr. Meyer, we have listened and we do push an expectation to our principals. As you know, we have weekly meetings with our principals just to touch in regarding where we are with COVID-19. And during the last meeting, the expectation was pushed and shared by me that in this last 24, 25 days of school, it's typically that time where assessments are over and you can begin to provide really creative and innovative lessons for kids. And based on the progression of our implementation of our instructional provision plan, the expectation shared to our principals and then reinforced through them to their teachers is not to take that away from our students. And to be completely open and honest, when I was in Miami and the big shift in terms of instructional priority was made towards the end of the year, and seeing very innovative and creative teaching in the levels of engagement at the end of the year that teachers were designing themselves as, hey, really meaningful experiences, that now that the test is out of the way, let's do this really cool, innovative, creative activity, which was producing a better result after the assessment had taken place. And that was the energy that we wanted to capture, which truly transformed the outcome over the next 7 years. And that's what we're pushing our principals to do, to work with our principals and support them, to give them that flexibility. Is that a big ask? Absolutely. Yes, it is. But our kids deserve it, and we will continue to support in these last 24 days that we're just not trying to get to the finish line, but provide them with the absolute most meaningful experience as we close the 2020 school year.
Thank you.
So my comment, and we talked about this in the briefing, is not all kids are gifted and have mastered all the standards. And my concern is, because we don't have this end of the year exam, FSA, to be able to really pinpoint what the child is missing or has missed. And my concern is going into the new school year, starting up, let's say they're in 3rd grade going into 4th grade, but really they didn't master all the standards, so they're already behind going into 4th grade. Can you speak just 2 minutes on some things that you're looking at and how we can help those children so that when we do start hopefully on August 10th, that that's not going to be an issue for us?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. And one of the things that we want to do proactively that we discussed this week, we haven't finalized or firmed up the policy, but unlike in years past, we are going to move forward with the last diagnostic of the iReady for the K through 8 students. If you take a look around, there are entities, AP, for instance, is testing at home. Some of the CTE is testing at home. Well, we are going to propose to do the iReady diagnostics to measure, where our students are, potentially measure, I should say. You have to use those results with a little bit of caution. We would not use them punitively for students, but just as a data point to see where we are. But really more concisely to answer your question, the systems that Dr. Moore has seen put in place in Miami-Dade that I have seen put in place across the state, early identification and intervention is key. And so when we come back, we have to be nimble and flexible in the early identification of the students that are below grade level and start with those invitations for after-school remediation, start with the schedule changes for intensive reading or intensive math, and not wait. One of the frustrations I had as the former executive director of Just Read Florida was, the Florida statutes around kindergarten screening require that to be done the first 30 days, and we would want to encourage districts to start providing those services and interventions to kindergarten students as soon as possible, and we saw some districts drag their heels. And so now that I'm here, there's just no way that we aren't going to early identify and screen students and start giving them additional supports. They respond to those supports, fantastic. You take them out of the intervention class, they don't need to go to remediation. But what we cannot do is just wait until November, December to start identifying students that need that. So we'd like to, take a pulse check, if you will, on what we've done thus far with the iReady in May. Like I said, haven't rolled out exactly what week that is, but over 90-something% of our kids are on iReady, knocking it out. They will easily do those diagnostics, like math one day or reading one day. As I said, the results, will they be higher than we expect for some students? Sure. Will they be lower than we expect for some students? Sure. But it gives us that pulse check, and then be prepared to identify and assist as early as possible next year.
Is there any more conversation and I've heard Dr. Moore mention it, to the boot camp, maybe a couple weeks before the school year starts? Is there any more thought to that?
Absolutely. We had Dr. Moore led a great discussion yesterday with some thought partners on what's going on. Dr. Moore, I don't know if you're going to take this away, but we are of course following the CDC guidelines and the recommendations from the state of Florida about what summer looks like as a whole. It looks more and more likely that many districts, well, not many, some, it's probably, most do their summer in the June, some choose to do it in July, but doing summer in July is not unheard of across the state. And so that would be a model to pursue. Final decisions have not been made about summer, but for this instance, really in many instances, I can see where it would be impactful, that sort of smooth transition back into the school year instead of, doing the summer programming in June and taking off a long break and having to, reintegrate students into that environment. I can see where it would be a great policy moving forward as a change in practice, but certainly for this year, it could certainly be the right thing to do. But as we were all waiting for, the next round of guidance from Tallahassee this week, some of that is yet to be determined.
So that's still,
Yeah.
okay.
So just through the chair, and I want to reinforce the work we started yesterday. I had the opportunity over Teams to pull together a local think tank made up of teachers, principals, community members, really to begin the conversation as to the work that we need to be doing, the problems we need to be identifying to ensure that we are prepared to, A, capture those opportunities of growth in the midst of COVID-19. Where do we pool and ensure that the changes of our instructional practice that benefits kids don't die away when we return? Be very intentional about having a conversation of the skills that we have developed in ourselves as educators that we were required to do, that we're finding benefit in the midst of this implementation. And B, look at the reality of when we return. And I think as I set up this conversation, I will share with you what I shared with them. We have the opportunity to prepare students to return to a system or take this time to identify opportunities to improve the system we know isn't working. And when I say the system, I'm not speaking specifically about the school district of Indian River County. I'm speaking of public education across the nation. And there's always dialogue and conferences and people surrounding the conversation around public education. But we have an opportunity locally to begin the conversation here, to identify what we are going to do different and be bold in that thinking. This is not a sit and wait and see what happens and be dependent on the state to talk about what teaching and learning looks like in the school district of Indian River County. Not on my watch. That's not how a world-class education works. We need to begin the conversation now. So in that initial conversation, we looked at summer programming and the opportunity to push back summer programming, the opportunity to expand boot camps to be very targeted, to provide the appropriate resources to the right students. And I can tell you, this implementation in my conversations, both at a national and state level, is something we all should be extremely proud of. But it's going to have an impact on our young children. Those who we are teaching to read right now, losing 25% of the school year in that pivotal time in their lives could have an impact for the rest of their lives. So we need to shift and modify, look at the standards that we're covering, look at the standards that were missed, and design a plan and force conversations ahead of time that may require additional negotiations, may require a different shift in terms of grading. And I'll tell you this, the work that we do around grading here, the philosophy, is light years ahead of a number of other districts. And when Mr. Meyer says, oh, we have that, standards aligned grading was something we were fighting for and working towards in Miami. And here we have it. And what a great opportunity, as Mr. Meyer mentioned, to continue to leverage and build upon that specific skill, that specific standard, and assessing aligned to that particular standard. So initial conversation, summer programming, looking at as we return students to school, having continuous conversations around the socially emotional impact of being outside of school for 5.5 months and coming back into the routines of teaching and learning, while at the same time not minimizing the expectation we have, the collective expectation we have around teaching and learning. And those are hard conversations, but I think I've pulled together some absolutely outstanding educators, principals, teachers, really to begin those conversations. So we won't be reacting, we will be leading. Right now, we know summer programming is a priority, having flexibility in the implementation, using data to define which students need which services, and also looking at the re-entry, the reboot of public education in the school district of Indian River County. How are we going to modify that to address the social emotional needs and not lose the momentum that we as a board and as a system have grown around the expectation of solid, meaningful, standards-aligned instruction? So that work is happening. Those conversations are being led by me and this team, and we're going to have very innovative, specific strategies to address the needs of our children.
Exciting.
It is.
It is, and I'm telling you, it
We're
is.
excited.
Excited.
This is our passion.
I'm feeling it here. We could probably talk about this for a couple of hours, but we have two more comments, and then we need to jump into, we have 3 other items, and I know item E, strategic plan, is going to take a while. So Mrs. Berenborg and then Mrs. Justice, and then we'll move on to the next item. Okay? Go ahead.
Thank you. I will say this discussion to me was just looking at what we're going to do here to deal with COVID-19 issues. So it's gotten into a lot deeper discussion than that. Mrs. Justice brought up differentiation and standards progression and teacher creativity. And I think those are things that hopefully Dr. Moore and Mr. Meyer are going to work on, helping teachers all have a good toolbox. And I think, you can't, just like all kids aren't the same, all teachers aren't the same. And some of them are equipped with better tools, and some of them are wanting to achieve better. So I think looking forward to what PD we're going to have in place, I think is wonderful for how we're going to move forward with this.
Thank you. Let me just say that shared by teachers yesterday during this conversation is better PD and more PD designed to align their specific needs. And that was shared by their teachers, and Mr. Meyer and myself both stood up to that expectation and said we will deliver meaningful PD aligned to or varied in a way to meet the specific needs of teachers.
Thank you. Mrs. Justice.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to speak specifically to something so that you can have some understanding of where I was going with, because it was very COVID-19 related as far as the education part of for our children. My children will receive an agenda. 17 other children that I know receive the same agenda, because it's in the same class. So I'll speak for the 18 of them. They receive it. There are certain, this teacher has been told she needs grades. So certain things are graded assignments. So we know what's graded. So he knows what things have to be done. There are some optional things. Some of these optional things are fun and fantastic and really nice, right? But he's got to get through the stuff he has to get through before he gets to go to the optional stuff, which is connected to the standards, and probably, as we know, the standards could be embedded within that. All of them probably actually could be embedded. So as a parent, I might have an ability to take some of those things and push them into an optional assignment. What I'm saying is that we have some children who very much need the practice. And we have some children, half a class that could be moving on and doing some type of project-based learning. And as Mrs. Zork pointed out, half a class that perhaps needs some remediation or extra attention from a teacher. Is there some advantage to allowing that teacher to allow some of the students to have some type of a completion certificate for the year, where their parents have some comfort that their children have mastered the standards necessary for next year, and then allow that teacher to then focus on those other students who may need some more attention on those specific standards. And I'm not saying that this is something that would happen for forever, but I think that we are requiring every student to do the same thing. If my son could take the IRI diagnostic for you right now and show that he's good to go, can he stop? Can he do the optional assignments? Could he do a project about genealogy? Could he call his grandmother do you know what I mean? That's the question. Because I'm just talking, some kids would be out of school. What last day for seniors was what, May 8th?
So there's a lot of questions in there.
Yeah, I know. Listen, I know.
So there's a few things that I think would answer them globally. The state of Florida does require a minimum number of instructional hours, and so we are trying to ensure that we do that. Now, in those instructional hours, to your point, there's nothing to be said that we have to continue to provide students standards, the opportunity to complete standards they've already demonstrated mastery. We did release guidance last week around grading, around assignments, where we did, to your exact point, Ms. Justice, recommend for them to offer alternative assignments and to offer them other things that they could be doing, whereas they could exempt the certain grades and then count other assignments for the grade. And so we are encouraging that in as many spaces as we can, because I agree with you. The students that have already shown mastery of addition, they don't need to do more addition. They need to be given an opportunity to do something else.
Because they would in the classroom.
Say again?
They would have that opportunity if they were in a classroom.
They would, and they have that opportunity now. So, we're trying to coach through that, and so I'll be happy to follow up if there are specific instances where people feel like they're not able to do that, because our office has given that guidance to the principals to hopefully get to the teachers that they should have that opportunity to do that, because it's something that should be done.
All right, we have 2 more hours to get through some really tough issues, or not issues, but topics. Mrs. Rosario, I see you have a comment, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, that's fine. I wanted to follow up on what Mrs. Justice was talking about, and I think the focus of what she may be addressing is the need for differentiated instructional strategies. And I'm not so sure that the district is there yet. To truly provide differentiated instruction, teachers really, not that they don't know, but there needs to be a holistic approach to that with really, really in-depth professional development and training. And that just doesn't happen overnight. But when we do offer differentiated instruction in the right way, then those abilities for each child at a different level, especially for those who have, who get it in a classroom of 18, if, you know, a handful get whatever the assignment is or the lesson, then other work can be provided differently for that child versus the other children. And that might actually be a really good segue into our strategic plan once we move in that direction.
Okay, so, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Dr. Moore?
Thank you. Very, very fruitful, meaningful conversation, and I do appreciate it. I don't think it's off-topic or irrelevant conversation. I think it's a very powerful conversation. I think we should engage in that conversation quite often. Next item will be presented by our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Ron Fagan, and the item is the gym floor at Sebastian River High School, followed by the critical millage update. And I will take this opportunity, so we don't have dead air, to thank Ms. Maddox and her team for once again navigating a very tricky form and providing a virtual meeting that goes off seamlessly, and we ensure that we're following every health precaution as we clean the desk in between cabinet members.
Good afternoon, board members, through the chair. First item today is a very exciting opportunity for Sebastian River High School. This is replacement of the gym floor. This gym floor is over 25 years old. Just think of the number of kids who have played basketball, played volleyball, did wrestling, everything else on that floor. Average cost for this is about $11 per square foot. Quotes went out in March. 4 bidders came to the site bid. Of the 4 bidders, 2 of them turned in no bids. Basically, they could not meet the timeline. We wanted this flooring built, completed over the summertime, because also over the summertime, we also want to replace the roof. So we had 2 major projects going on. So of the 4 bidders, 2 of them turned in no bids, 2 of them turned in a bid. One of them was a local vendor, Frontier. He's done work for us in the past, has done very good work, and he won that bid. The item for you tonight is a $97,000 item. This is for him to come in, demo, remove, lay down maple hardwood floor. We, through direct purchasing, bought the plywood to go underneath that, saved a few $1,000s, but nothing significant. Overall price of the project is about $139,000. It's 2 phases. One is the floor, second is the striping. Striping will be done in July. Timeline is board approval tonight. We'll issue the PO. As usual, when you do hardwood floors, you have to have a lead time to get the material. You have to deliver the material, and the material has to sit for about a week or so to get acclimated to the area. And that's it.
Okay,
Any questions?
I do, but I think Mrs. Justice has a question.
I want to say thank you for the plywood. I think saving a couple $1,000s is always good. So well done, Mr. Fagan, and Dr. Moore, to the district team, purchasing team. And I think this is long overdue. You're correct, it's expensive, but our students deserve equity, and Mrs. Simchek, who was a former board member, always really advocated for Sebastian River High School, and so she will be very happy to see this project happen. I will give her a ring and let her know. So happy to approve this tonight. Thank you, Mr. Fagan.
Okay. Mr. Fagan, this was in the capital
Yes, ma'am.
plan.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I,
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot.
And
The
it-
overall budget was approximately $250,000, so
Okay.
there's about $100,000 left.
okay,
That will go to other flooring projects.
that is nice. So they're gonna do the roof, and then they're gonna do the flooring, correct?
Flooring first, then the roof.
Okay,
The roof is a re-roofing, so the roof will not come off, so there's no risk of water damage.
okay. Let's hope not, right?
I'll make a motion.
Oh,
That's for tonight,
that's for tonight.
Oh, that's right, this is discussion.
but
I'm so
you
ready.
placed your bookmark.
But that was,
I'm happy
that's,
for Sebastian.
that was good practice. Okay, perfect.
And then we'll move right into the second item, Mr. Fagan has mentioned, is the critical millage update. This is just an opportunity to provide some of the updates or corrections based on your feedback at our last board meeting.
Yes, ma'am, through the chair. As you know, we added the word continual or continuation throughout the entire resolution in several spots. It's also on the ballot itself. It's also on the agenda item for tonight. The item has been reviewed by legal and also sent over to the Board of County Commissioners for the meeting on the 5th. The ballot itself is within the number 75 words and has also been translated into Spanish as required by the elections. We did have to do a little work on that because when it came back, we had a couple of people in the district read it, didn't quite read the way we wanted it to, so we modified that a little bit. Going to the Board of County Commissioners on the 5th, August election. Remember, this is approximately going to bring in 12 to 13 million dollars if the property values continue to grow up, but with the virus, that may not happen. That could grow to 13 to 14 million dollars over the lifetime. Got some information from the President of the Senate in a little memorandum that came out with some good news. Tax collections were only down about 12 million, which is good news for the forecast. Overall collections are $61 million over the projection, and $200 million year to date. Also, if you do remember, the federal stimulus package is about $4 billion. We've got about 4.1. And based on some preliminary information, if the stimulus money comes in and the tax collections are not as bad as everyone thinks, they may not go back to a special session to modify the budget, but that's on high hopes. But between the stimulus and the reserves and the collections, may not be a hit this year. However,
This year.
Moody's and several major indicators have indicated that probably throughout the rest of the year, you're going to probably see between an 8 and a 35% drop in production in the United States, and therefore that will probably lead us to a recession. And therefore the question is how long will it take to get out of that? So 2021, we may be safe, but after that, there's no telling what might happen. CARES Act, K-12 is approximately $770 million, $693 million for districts. DOE is retaining about 77 for special projects or administration. I'm not sure about that. Haven't found the details on that. My contact at DOE said they have not pushed that out yet. It will be coming, but not known yet. Hopefully have that within the next 30 days. That's it. Any questions?
Do we have a question? Okay. Mrs. Barrenborg?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you for the rewording of this. I think you were able to keep all of the board members' comments involved without really leaning to one or the other. So I appreciate the fact that this looks like it's going to not just be a continuation, but also look like it's not going to be an additional tax. So thank you for doing that.
Okay.
Good.
I do have a question on the one item. Was it the Florida retirement system that we were looking at, the increase that we have to start putting more money? Was that what it was?
Yes, ma'am.
4.2
Florida Retirement
million?
System, through the chair. Yes, ma'am.
That was through legislation, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And my understanding, that has not been signed yet by the governor, or has it been?
The insurance has. That additional for the retirement, yes, but the budget itself, no.
So he's already approved?
Right.
Okay,
Yes,
so we
ma'am.
know
From my
for sure.
understanding, yes, ma'am.
Okay, I was hopeful that he wasn't gonna sign that one. Okay. All right, that's all
Thank
the
you.
questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan, and thank you for that update. Our goal is to keep you informed. Mr. Fagan received that information this morning, and we wanted to ensure that we were passing that along to you as quickly as possible. Our final item for this evening is the opportunity to seek input and guidance from our board regarding the development of our new strategic plan or enhanced strategic plan. I don't know if you want, yeah, I think,
10 minutes?
yeah.
Board members, we are gonna take a 10-minute break so that we can prepare for this presentation.
Thank you.
This is the superintendent's workshop. It's April 28th, 2020. And we are on our final presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Moore for more explanation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an opportunity to provide an update and have a conversation regarding the development of our strategic plan. I'll begin the conversation by saying, even in the midst of COVID-19, the school district of Indian River County, the leadership, principals, teachers, and community have remained committed to providing input, support, guidance on our effort to continue to move through and meet the implementation of our 100-day plan. I say our because it is becoming our plan, to really look at us as a whole, to evaluate who we are, define what we collectively believe, and evaluate our actions based on those beliefs. So today's conversation is an update regarding the work we have done over the last 3 weeks. Even though we have been closed, even though as a globe we have pivoted in terms of what teaching and learning looks like and created an online platform, we continue to have the conversations. So my goals today really are not only to provide input to the board regarding the process that we're currently working through as staff and as a collective team, but really to seek input from our board members. So as I provide this presentation, I'll conclude by allowing each board member the opportunity to give feedback, and then in our coming weeks together, continue to seek clarity from you as board members regarding your priorities as a board member. And when I say priorities, I'm not talking about individual initiatives, but at the root of your desire to become a school board member, to have a long-lasting impact on the children of the school district of Indian River County, what do we as an organization need to value? What do we, or what do you as a board member value? As we design this plan, it has to be, or has to include all perspectives, and it has to be done in an open and transparent way. So I really want to speak to you regarding not only the work that we're doing now, but ultimately engage in conversation beginning today and then in the coming weeks around our priorities, defining where we should be heading as an organization in order to ensure we are acting in the best interest of the children in which we are charged to serve, acting in the best interest of the employees that we are charged to lead, and providing an educational reality for each and every single student that ensures that they have the opportunity to walk into a school, feel comfortable, feel safe, feel loved, and as a result of that acceptance and that warm, welcoming, loving environment, they can connect to the quality of instruction that we're providing, and then not only define their potential, but as a result of us empowering them with the skills, the abilities, the behaviors, the knowledge, can spend a lifetime redefining that potential. And I know you've heard me say that a number of times in the short time that I've been here. You're going to hear me continue to say it. I've been saying that since I was a school counselor at Miami Douglas MacArthur Senior High School South, which was an alternative school, when I truly realized the power, the purpose, and impact of what public education can have on the lives of children. And that has been my driving force every day moving forward. So we will look at strategic priorities for board members. And I really want to connect and begin the conversation around our goals from the existing strategic plan. I think there are opportunities as an organization to bridge the current goals that we have and have some dialogue regarding, are these the right goals? And are these goals truly reflective of our beliefs, actions? And if not, do we shift or do we modify? Do the goals present us as an organization opportunities not to maximize outcome? Do the goals put us in a siloed approach and pull us away? And I have said from the onset, a good strategic plan pulls the resources, the thinking, and the energy of a system together and pushes them towards one clearly defined path. And what I have learned, and was warned by certain board members upon my entry, that this system is small. And in order for a system that is small to be effective, you need to be aligned. You need to have clearly defined priorities, because you don't have one person to be responsible for every single thing within a school system, but one person responsible for multiple priorities. And that's not a bad thing. It's a reality. And what allows us to continue to move as fast, and in most cases faster than other larger organizations, is our strategic plan and our alignment of focus, purpose, and belief. And then a conversation regarding additional goals should we consider for our new strategic plan or the modification of our strategic plan. I don't want to mislead our community. This is an initial conversation that will help guide the thinking of staff to support our board members in the development of our new strategic plan, the structure of our new strategic plan, and move us to a place where we can engage in the conversation around mission and vision with board members, myself, and staff. We won't talk mission and vision today, but these are conversations that will lead us to very, very productive conversations in the coming weeks. Just a quick look back in our listen and learn phase. A great deal of information was learned. We conducted internal stakeholder meetings, school visits, surveys, focus groups, data reviews, district events. I highlight over 10,000 data points through multiple forums and multiple conversations, connecting not only within the confines of this room, but within the community, opportunities really to gain a deep understanding through dialogue and discourse, just not responses to survey or a checking of a box, but ultimately a clear and deep understanding is where we are as a system and as an organization. Then we had the opportunity just prior, the week of closing as a result of COVID, to share this information with the board. And if you recall, during that presentation, I was excited to begin this next step. In all honesty, this next step was prolonged by about 3 or 4 weeks as a result of COVID-19. And I will take this opportunity and every opportunity that I have to continue to thank my team, our principals, our teachers and staff for leading through very difficult time. As a result of their effort, their commitment to our students, we're back on track. We continue the conversation around our priorities and pulling us together through a meaningful, aligned strategic plan. Before I provide the board the opportunity to give insight regarding their priorities, and once again, I don't think we will have a all-encompassing conversation today, but just an initial response to this so I can engage and guide and work with staff and with you in coming workshops as well as our meetings to ensure that this plan is reflective of our collective priorities in serving students. It is important to me to really begin this work or the next phase of this work in looking at guiding principles and belief statements. In my theory and in my practice, in terms of strategic planning, creating plans, implementing change management, operationalizing initiatives, it is key that it's not just about the plan, but ultimately defining what are your guiding principles, what are your belief statements. Align the organization's vision and mission. Although we're not talking about the vision and mission today, I want to have conversations around what we collectively believe. Ms. Dampier, who is with us today, can tell you multiple times me saying if we had guiding principles, we wouldn't be talking about this right now. This is a conversation that's taking us off the mission and our core value because we haven't clearly defined these are our guiding principles. These are the behaviors that are acceptable within the confines of our organization that we have collectively agreed upon. And as an organization, the strength in that collective belief is power. It is power in the sense that it gives authority and credit to all members of the organization. Gives them power and authority to call out when individuals are acting in ways or stating behaviors or doing things that contradict the organization's core beliefs, the organization's guiding principles. So taking the time to say, hey, what do we as an organization believe before we define the structure, the path, the goals is a priority. And that's the work that we have been engaging in over the last 3 weeks, capitalizing on what we have learned, collecting information and dialogue through our focus groups that we continue to have. So we'll talk through behaviors, decisions, and how outcomes are judged, and it will provide a reference for all the work that we do. In every meeting, every conversation, a collective understanding to how we believe so we could maximize every opportunity we have as an organization. This is information that just kind of captures the work over the last 3 weeks. It looks through the structure and the evolution of the information that I'm about to share. And I thought this was important to share, and I sent this additional information to you late yesterday at a request of one of our board members, because this is very small to see. I understand it, but my goal here was to capture that as a result of input, collaboration, conversation, and dialogue, the guiding principles, the statements which we're about to review, have grown over time. And what I'm presenting today isn't a completed product or isn't a this is it, check, put a check in the box. It's currently where we are at. And this is an opportunity to continue that conversation, reflect on the input that is shared today, refine it, grow it, and then bring it back to you in the coming weeks moving forward. So when you look at the slide before you, we're looking at guiding principles and belief statements in this slide. Student focus. All decisions and actions are aligned to maximizing the potential of all students. This is a guiding principle that should drive our work as an organization. As a guiding principle, we should ensure that our decisions, our actions are aligned to maximizing the potential of all students. And as it is written, it is clearly an opportunity to begin a meeting. As we begin or work through today or this meeting, let's ensure that our decisions and actions are aligned to maximizing the potential for all students. You get into jargon and you get into wordsmithing when you get into strategic planning. And it becomes ineffective as you debate and go through the discourse of which word, is that a noun, is that a verb, or should that go here? That's not the goal. That's not the objective, is to have conversation and dialogue about how to wordsmith a document, but to create a document that drives and clarifies our purpose and our work. So we wanted to go a deep further in saying if student focus is that guiding principle, what belief statements uphold that guiding principle? So we have 4 boxes down here, which we have yellow, highlighted in yellow, the most important piece of that work. All learners are provided with equity and access, equitable access to rigorous, high-quality educational experiences. In all things that we do, regardless of your area of responsibility, we need to ensure equitable access is being provided. It is everyone's responsibility. We've done work in the 4 months that I've been here around ensuring equitable access. We have redesigned how we do the African American Achievement Plan. We have spread that responsibility to all members of the organization, defined their roles in ensuring that there is equitable access. Evidence-based innovation in learning operations is vital to improving educational practice. Innovation is what our children deserve. And as an organization, as an educational institution, as educators ourselves, we must be invested in our own development to continuously evaluate what we're offering to our students and ensure that it prepares them to meet the needs of the 21st century. And if we're not constantly examining our practice and finding ways to innovate and create new experiences to improve the reality of instruction, we will become stale, we will become ineffective, and parents will choose other options and avenues to educate their children. It's the responsibility of us as an organization to have a solid focus on continuing to innovate within our schools, within our classrooms. The individuality of all school community members creates great strength in our partnerships and support equity and inclusiveness. This has been key throughout all of our conversations. The need to ensure that we are respectful, we're honoring input, we're collecting informations, that is a strength. And I can tell you it is one of the greatest strengths of this community in the time that I have been here. And as an organization, we need to value that. We need to capitalize in on that. Respectful, supportive educational environments are foundational to the physical and emotional health and safety to all individuals. As we prepare to design our budget and engage in conversation in the coming weeks and months, we need to ensure that we are supporting environments in which students feel safe, comfortable, respected, and loved. And we need to ensure in the midst of that environment, in that culture, we can continue to uplift our students and provide them with a rigorous instruction that prepares them for their needs. So in this slide, you have one sole focus, one guiding principle: to be student-focused. All beliefs, decisions, and actions are aligned to maximize the potential of all students, supported by belief statements. And then we wanted to take it just a step further to clarify our thinking and really looked at aligned behaviors. And when I say aligned behaviors, it's really drilling down to very specific behaviors. And we could probably even continue to drill down even smaller and minimize some of the statements that you see before you hear. But aligned behaviors are connected to our belief statements, which are words. We're stating what we believe to support our guiding principle. Aligned behaviors is how we're acting. It's our in and out throughout a school day. This allows us to provide students aligned, rigorous instruction that is differentiated for individual student needs. You can see that happening. That is a behavior that you should see in all classrooms. And when it's not happening, it's very easy to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't think our behaviors are right. I don't think our actions are where they need to be. Implement policies and practices that eliminate educational disparities. Also, once again, does this policy, does this practice, does this decision in scheduling eliminate educational or support disparity? If it does or it doesn't, there's an opportunity to call us on that. So not to engage in every single one of the 8, but to provide it as a talking point through conversation. Aligned behaviors are opportunities for all members of our organization to understand these are the behaviors that are expected, that uphold our belief statements, that uphold our guiding principle. We're engaging in this work now before we get to the overall structure of our plan. When we have the opportunity to engage in conversation regarding the structure, it becomes so much more powerful and effective when our thinking has been clarified amongst all members of the organization. The fruit of the dialogue, the richness of the conversation is drastically enhanced when you're talking through a protocol-driven process that is defined through your behaviors your actions, and your beliefs. That is where we are in this particular moment with our strategic plan. As I said, this is not a complete project, but this is a check-in with the board to receive feedback from you. If you look at the slide that's in front of you now, you see a strategic plan opportunities for improvement. This is information that has been shared with you at the board meeting prior to COVID-19, identifying, hey, these are our opportunities for improvement. The checks in the box do not by any means identify that we're done with this work, but it means over the last 3 or 4 weeks, the work that we have done, we're beginning to address identifying student achievement as a priority. These guiding principles define the guiding principle. These belief statements define student achievement as a priority. Eliminate silos to create unified vision and a way of work for school improvement. Are we there fully based on this work? No. But unifying our beliefs allows us to begin to eliminate the silos that currently exist within our organization. Increase the specificity of strategies so they're actionable. That's work we're yet to engage in. Increase measures of success, provide evidence of quality and effectiveness of strategy, work we're yet to engage in. Ensure goals and strategies support equity and inclusion. This work begins that as a priority. Identify and incorporate guiding principles. Well, obviously, that's a big piece of this presentation, but it is a priority. And then still yet to do, increase alignment between districts and school improvement plans. That is key. That is work that has been charged to Mr. Meyer and his team, as well as Ms. Dampier, to ensure that there is, when developed, a solid connection between these are our priorities as an organization, supported in our strategic plan, supported in our school improvement plans, and aligned in a way in which we're maximizing the opportunities for us as an organization. If you look at this next slide, it defines our next steps. Identify overall organization of the plan and strategies, priorities, and goals. That is work that we will engage in once we've clarified and normed around the guiding principle and behaviors and statements that we're talking about today. Gathering stakeholder feedback using various approaches in all aspects of this work. We will continue to gauge the input and flavor of our community, providing them opportunities to connect and support the development of this plan. Identify focus areas, operationalize action steps within each of the identified focus areas. So board members, that is my presentation update on the work that we've been doing in the midst of COVID-19 regarding the development of our strategic plan. What I'd like to do at this time, and I know just for the benefit of the public, we've had opportunities to discuss this work initially. I've sent information via email. This is an opportunity for you to provide me feedback on the presentation that I had today. I am very eager to receive that information, very eager to synthesize that information and work back over the next several days and weeks to pull the consensus together as a board to present to you what we believe is a guiding principle or guiding principles, what our belief statements would be, and what our organizational behaviors should be to support one another. And once we have that thinking normed and identified, I think we'll begin the next step, which is the organization of the strategic plan, the determination of mission and vision, and the overall structure of our plan, looking at action steps, goals. Should they be SMART goals? Absolutely, in some way or form. How long should they be tasked out? How does this strategic plan that is written over the course of 5 years drill down to one particular year's worth of work? How am I, as your superintendent, your chief executive officer, tasking and holding all members of staff accountable to defining the action that they will use to move us towards the implementation and full implementation of our strategic plan? how are you as a board holding me accountable for the implementation of this plan? You know, it was not a awkward or uncomfortable conversation during our last meeting to talk about evaluating me aligned to this strategic plan. That's what I want. And it needs to be done in a way to allow me to align the energy and resources of this district. That is what an effective board does. That is what an effective superintendent seeks. And I am looking forward to receiving your feedback, putting it together, and continuing along this work of developing a strategic plan that once again ensures that we are SDIRC stronger together. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Mrs. Rosario. So what I'm hearing is that the superintendent wants feedback on what he's completed so far here, and that we can meet with him and continue to give him our input on it. And so it's an overview. It's not, we have an hour and 15 minutes, so just keep that in mind, and there's 5 of us. So Mrs. Rosario. And then it's Dr. Schiff.
I first want to thank Dr. Moore for presenting this to us. I have been at the edge of my seat waiting for this day to begin because since I became a board member, since I was elected, I've been talking about the need to revise our strategic plan as it is right now. There are a lot of things in the strategic plan, though it's a great plan, there are no measurable outcomes, or there are very few measurable outcomes that are clear. And the overarching goals that are in our current plan are fine and good, but as we progress from year to year, goals change, our data changes, and we need to address, especially now that we have a new superintendent and a fairly new board still, we need to address the changes within our district so that it rightly reflects the district that we are in now, not the district that we were in 2016. So thank you for bringing this forward. I wanted to mention, I know that you probably mentioned it when you went through the slides, that the attachments that you gave us, it was that one slide that had the smaller kind of PDF documents in it that was hard for most to see. You did provide that to board members, the guiding principles. And I just wanted to point out something that I really appreciate, Dr. Moore, and I wanted to thank you publicly for this, because there wasn't just a document that you provided to us today. There wasn't just the communication that you've had, at least with this board member, with me, prior to your workshop today. There is a strategy and a forward thinking that began when you were hired. In your 90-day plan, you planned for this day very strategically, and that's what those little PDFs were.
Uh-oh.
That's unfortunate.
Jackie, hold on.
Hold on, Jackie, you're,
And I want to know public was real data that was collected, and that's what was provided to us in a separate email. The guiding principle started with a draft 1, and there were several boxes there, and there were several different items that were identified: student-centered decision-making, equitable and inclusive practices, respectful school communities, and you collected all of this data throughout all of the town hall meetings and throughout all of the face-to-face focus groups and so on and so forth. Am I right with that?
Through the chair, yes, you are correct.
And that's what leads us to the last draft, which is what you provided for us today. I have so much to say that I know that there is time that is limited, but I want to say that overall, I love the student focus, because I know that you were asking for our input on what the strategic priorities, what our strategic priorities are. I love the student focus. My initial thought on my notes was academic excellence or students first. But student focus, I don't have any issues with the wording of that. I'm just sharing what my notes were, initially. So I had academic excellence or students first. I know that we're going to get into our goals and our vision and our mission later, but with student or academic excellence or student first or student focus, I want to make sure that every dollar we spend is dollars that put our students in the classroom first. I want to make sure that every decision is focused on what is in our strategic plan and that it is a data-driven decision-making process in order for us to get that student focus, in order for us to get to students first. I know that we can't have one without the other. And I'm not sure if I'm articulating this right and if this is in that right category of strategic priorities, which you've asked for us. Is that what you're asking for? Just want to make sure I'm looking for clarity from you.
Through the chair, absolutely on point in terms of
Okay.
your comments is exactly what I want to hear, and I think as a community, we all need to hear.
Okay, thank you. So you had 3 questions that you gave board members. That was one of them, our strategic priorities, our specific goals. So the next thing that I had was, let me go back to student excellence or academic excellence, students first, whatever. I also want to make sure that within that priority, that we are focusing on diversity and equity, obviously. I say that so as a matter of fact, but I don't know if it would be obvious. So I suppose I need to say that out loud. The next one would be parent and community engagement. And my third is human resources / climate and culture / leadership development. I really only identified 3, and I think everything else can kind of fall under those 3.
Okay.
And I hope and I'm not excluding things like technology or STEM focus or, eliminating our push for the Treasure Coast Technical College. I don't want to eliminate all of those, other branches, but I suppose the root or the 3 roots would be those 3 for me.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. Dr. Schiff? Dr.
I
Schiff?
should be prepared and unmute myself first. Yeah, didn't do that. Like Mrs. Rosario, thank you for bringing these forward. This is something that I've been looking forward to as well. Strategic planning is something I really enjoy doing. And if anything is difficult for me about this, it's that I don't get to be in the weeds and in the nitty gritty doing the work with you. That's actually really hard for me, to stay 30,000 feet up and not dig in. Within that, though, understanding the roles and limits and structure of my job as a board member, which is very different than your job as a superintendent or the jobs of cabinet and staff to actually dig in and do the work. I'm gonna try and be succinct, but I'm gonna also say some things into the record. I strongly support and love the idea of belief statements. I think it's not just belief statements, it's also core values. And those go hand in hand. And I don't want to necessarily presume that one subsumes the other. But I'd like us to look at our core values as well as our belief statements, because I believe our belief statements flow from our core values. And we've not yet had that conversation.
in the belief statements, and I know you said don't wordsmith, and I promise you I'm not going to do that, though it is, everybody knows it's my tendency.
It is a skill for you.
What? I'm
It
sorry?
is a skill. It is a skill you have.
Yeah, and I can't help it. It's like genetically encoded. But that said, I do think it's important when we talk about belief statements that we actually use the words "we believe that." I think this is a place where we actually, it's not just that all learners are provided with equitable access. We believe that, and we believe that as a district, we believe it as a leadership team, we believe it as a board, and we believe it as everybody who chooses to engage with the work of this district. And I think in that case, it matters. That's as far as I'm going to go with wordsmithing, though I do have more. We can do that privately.
We will.
I like also the idea of behaviors aligned with core beliefs. And again, I want to add core values, belief statements and core values. You and I have talked about this, and I'm going to say it publicly here. And this should not be heard in any way as pushing back on or not supporting the emphasis on a student focus. But I want to also add to that our students only do as well as the supports that we provide for the people who spend 6 and 8 hours a day in a room with those students. And that's everyone from our teachers to our administrators, our principals, our lunchroom staff, our food and nutrition, our custodial staff. All of those contribute to the well-being of students. And so student focus is not simply what do we do in terms of academic excellence and achievement, but it's also how do we support the people? How do we make sure that people walking into work in the morning absolutely love the feeling they get? And you've spoken about that, and I understand that. But I want to strongly emphasize that it is not simply the feeling that students get, it's also the feeling that everybody who walks in gets, our teachers, our parents, our community members, our administrators. And I want to expand that, or I want some way to clarify that having a student focus means that this is what's underneath it, that this is what is the foundation for the well-being of students as well. And I've used this analogy before. I have no idea if I've used it publicly here or not. But it's like when you get on the airplane and they say, in case of an emergency, put on your oxygen mask first and then help the person next to you. That's what this is. We have to give oxygen to the people who are then charged with giving oxygen to the students. And I want to make sure that that's reflected as we move forward. You asked you asked us in this conversation, and you gave us some materials to help us think about what are our strategic priorities as a board member. Though it's a boring way to do it, I'm going to read through some of the ones that I wrote for that, only because if anybody wants to know what I think or cares, they can always go back and listen to this tape and dissect it more thoroughly. We don't have time to do that now, so I'm just going to put them into the record. These are not in order of importance, but these are the things that I came up with that fundamentally matter to me. And I'm going to have to turn my head to look at the screen. And many of these, by the way, are already reflected in what you came up with. I wrote these. We were doing this work parallel and simultaneously, but not necessarily in collaboration and cooperation. So in the ways that it was happening. So one, ensure equitable education, access to resources and disciplinary processes for all students. 2, establish SDIRC as a center of academic excellence, faculty innovation, student leadership, and community collaboration. 3, create cultures of support, inclusion, and transparency for all students, teachers, and staff. 4, establish and maintain strong collaboration and engagement between and among students, parents, community members, local business, and education partners. 5, build strong and effective leadership and pathways to leadership for district teachers, staff, and administration. 6, attract and maintain the highest quality public education workforce possible in public education by offering unparalleled material and non-material incentives and benefits. And lastly, become known as one of the top 5 districts in Florida public education based on academic achievement, teacher and staff support, innovative teaching, and administrative leadership. Those are my priorities. that doesn't exclude, like Mrs. Rosario said, that doesn't exclude all of the nitty gritty and how we get there. It doesn't exclude things like ensure the safety and security of all campuses and all students at all time. It doesn't exclude that. That is certainly a priority for me, but I could go on and on with 10 to 15 priorities, and I don't want to do that here. I want to be clear, there is one thing that was missing from this in the past. I'm sure Mrs. Berenborg is going to resonate with this and probably has it on her list too. But the way that goals were written in the past, they were not specific, measurable, achievable, realizable, that whole, right, exactly, I knew you'd have that. They were not SMART goals. And it's a huge shortcoming of the way this was written in the past because they're way too vague. And when we're asked, are there specific goals from our existing strategic plan that should remain a priority? Of course they should. Of course those are a priority, but they're not written in a way that gives us access to how we're going to achieve and accomplish those things, how we're going to know if it's there. And I love that you said how we're going to measure your performance in getting us there. Because you're right, this is how you should be evaluated. And if I were you too, I would absolutely want to be evaluated on that. Am I doing what I promised you I was going to do? Because if I'm not doing it, then we're not a good team together. And I appreciate you bringing that to the fore in this conversation. When we talk about what additional goals should be considered from our strategic plan, again, it falls in line. I think we're asking the wrong questions. I don't think the question is, what additional goals should we ask? I think the question is, how do we take the goals we have and refine them to reflect the current reality, not just in who is this governance team and these leadership teams in the district, but the new reality that is we've spent the last 2 hours talking about, that we are discovering through these unforeseen circumstances and the intended and unintended consequences and benefits that we're learning through that. And I think those things have to be reflected as we move forward in how we redesign a strategic plan and we redesign goals. Because we've learned so much from this, and we're not even nearly halfway there. So I don't want to go on too much about this. But I don't think we have the wrong goals. I think we have goals that are not properly formulated, that have to be expanded, that have to be SMART goals. And we have to consider them inside of, as you've identified, core beliefs or belief statements, but underneath that of core values. And I would ask that we find a way as a board and a governance team and leadership team to come together and talk about what are those core values and how will we put them into belief statements and then translate those into SMART goals for our district. Okay. Thank you. That's the end of my monologue for now.
Thank you.
Do you want to comment? No? Okay. Mrs. Justice?
Thank you very much. I thought a lot about what school means because I know you said guiding principles and beliefs, and it was really supposed to be kind of this, larger view about education. The word school comes from a Greek word that meant somewhat had to do with leisure and a place for discussion. And so when I thought about what my children's education or all of our children's education has become, we've taken that place for discussion away, and especially in the school district, to be honest, because we haven't utilized Zoom or any of these other technological advances to help to support our students' learning. So we've taken that facet away. To me, education is about learning. We talk about unfolding the full potential of every child. I know that it's been said that education is birthed out of the need of the environment where it's currently happening. Thank you. And, so Dr. Morse talked a lot about the opportunity for innovation. It's very exciting. I hope that is a guiding force throughout the strategic planning process. But I truly think that I want my kids to want to go to school. I want kids to want to go to school. And my kids, I don't know how it is for other parents right now, but my children are not enjoying school. They want to get through it as quickly as possible so they can get to the rest of their day. And I hate that. Mm-hmm. And I've really had to reflect back on, okay, I'm sending my kids to school. Did they like school before? Some of them did. They liked classes. They had connections with teachers that made it more meaningful. You know, we're having big discussions about what does school look like next year? Are you going to go to physical school? Are you going to be homeschooled? Or what's that going to look like for you? So really, when we talk about guiding principles, you know, Dr. Schiff spoke about adults, making adults comfortable, making adults feel valued and supported. And, you know, I really think if we all come together to do what's best by students, and that might be a little uncomfortable for some of us or a lot of us at times, that's what will make for that positive shift in culture and climate in our schools and in our community. But really, you know, when I first ran for school board, I met with Freddie Wolfert at Gifford Youth Achievement Center, and we were talking about Gifford High School. And we talked about desegregation. And when desegregation happened, Freddie, I think, was the first graduating class from Vero Beach High School. And he talked about how when there was Gifford High School, and I know Pamela Dampier and I have discussed this before, it was a 100% graduation rate from Gifford High School. 100%. And then when deseg happened and the black kids came to Vero Beach High School, parents didn't feel comfortable. They didn't come to the school anymore. They didn't support their children. And something about that idea of legacy and tradition and that wanting to be a part of something bigger than yourself, if we can accomplish that for students, I think everything else will really become very easy. Because I'd like to give that to them. And I don't know that they have it right now. And that is it.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mrs. Barrenborg?
Yes, I believe all my fellow board members have brought up some really great points. I apologize, I was fidgeting trying to find headphones that would work with this computer, but I can't. So I apologize if there's reverberation. When I ran for office, I had this card created, and I gave this to you, I believe, in my one-on-one
I have it.
with you when we were looking at hiring you. And Dr. Schiff is right. One of the goals on there is improving the goals of the strategic plan and the expectations and making them smart. And I think that's where we start. And that has to do with what Mrs. Justice and Ms. Rosario were bringing up with as far as culture. You're both right, all of you are right. You have to have a good culture, and the culture comes from the top. And if everybody believes in the mission and the vision and they're part of that team and part of that culture, they're going to go for it. That's basic 101 for coaching. When you're a coach, you try to get everybody on the same rah-rah team, and you build that culture to try to help everybody move in that direction. And if you're good at that and you have a good culture, hopefully you have positive results and you move forward. But I have witnessed, being on different campuses, that you get the feel right away when you walk on a campus if the culture is good or not. And I know that we as a board have witnessed culture that was not as good. And I think that we're moving towards that good culture, even with everything that's happened. And I know that, Dr. Moore, that's what I'm going to task you with, is building that culture to the point where all these other things line up with that culture. So if you can put culture first, which means students first, and then those adults want to be part of that culture, I think we're going to move in the right direction. Belief statements are very powerful, and they promote positive culture. And I think that's where you start with those belief statements, that everybody believes in the same thing. If you look at our high schools and some of our middle schools and how they really talk about, believe in blue and, rah-rah Indians and sharks and all that, you feel that culture when you go on those schools. And I think that's the same thing for our district, is we need that bonding culture. And that's what's going to move us forward. So on my little card, I had school safety, students first, anti-bullying, worrying about kids, and protecting kids. School choice was one of mine. Early literacy programs, very important to me. STEAM, of course, and vocational programs in the arts. And I think, like you have mentioned several times, we have a really great arts program. And I know we're going to be looking at some very difficult budget issues in the future. And I want to keep in mind that the arts are very important to us. The abundance of testing was one of mine. And I think now that we've seen testing going out the window, I think it's a really great thing to be able to jump on. So looking at the abundance of testing and how we can still survive and kids can still learn without all this stuff. And then if we are really listening to our surveys and to our people, then I think Dr. Schiff brought it up with the leadership paths. That was the thing I remember from the surveys from last year. How many times we heard our employees say there was no opportunity for advancement, there was no opportunity to learn more, to improve and do a better job in moving towards something better. And I think we're on the right path with who you hired and giving us that opportunity to move forward with being fair to our, not just our kids, but to our employees as well. But again, I think it starts with culture. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So I have a couple of thoughts, and like you said, this is ongoing. Something that I pulled out that I agree with all that the board members are saying. A lot of good points that they brought up. But one thing that I think about though when we put I love the fact of student focus. That's why we're here, right? It's all about the students. But it's not only just being data driven, but in order to build that culture on these campuses, especially with our middle schools and our high schools, because they are so large, is that we have to be, and I like this one, aligned behavior about relationships, but we have to be intentional about creating relationships with our students so that they don't just feel like a number on their campuses. And that's something I'm hoping that as we go forward, we can intentionally, we have the band groups, the cheer groups, the football teams, but what about those other students that aren't a part of those groups? How do they become a part of a group, part of a team, and not feel so isolated? So that's something I'm hoping that we can cultivate going forward. Obviously, in the community and individuality, one of my areas that's important to me is making sure that we continue, and we're doing a good job of it now, we're just starting, but continue to grow our school choice opportunities that our students, in order for us to really individualize that path that the students want to go on, we have to continue to keep looking for those opportunities. Another area that I think is important is in innovation and research, that section that you had, is I think it's important that we, and it's already been mentioned, professional development, but you know, our standard is a high quality workforce, and if we don't have that, what are we doing to help us get there? So those are some areas. I love what Mrs. Rosario said about every dollar spent. We have to make sure that it goes into the classroom, focus on the classroom. Parent community engagement is very important. Build strong relations, or build strong leadership pathways. That's very important. That's something that we've heard. I've heard over the last 3 years about leadership opportunities. I love what Dr. Schiff said about being the top 5 schools in the state. I agree with that 100%. And then definitely what Mrs. Barenborg had mentioned about culture and climate. So I think we're all kind of on the same wavelength on these.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. To receive the feedback really is warming to my heart in terms of where we can go as an organization through a culture, supporting an expectation, defined behaviors, guiding principles, core beliefs to move that work forward. And in order for us to be successful as a team, a school board, superintendent, senior staff, district staff, principals, teachers, students. We need to be aligned in our beliefs. And I can tell you, in all honesty, in complete transparency, one of the biggest deficits that I can define in the system as a whole, which isn't on a piece of paper or isn't a finding that you can find in reviewing documents, is there hasn't been the authority to make difficult decisions. And a difficult decision, to me, I've always said, isn't necessarily difficult if you're acting in the best interest of children. And you can uphold what you value and what you believe. And as an organization, since those beliefs haven't been clearly defined and stated consistently and every single day within the organization, some difficult decisions that needed to be made weren't made. And we took a path of least resistance, or we took a path of appeasing the loud, pressing presence versus acting on what is the best interest of children. And I don't have a particular example at mind, but one thing that has truly allowed me to dig into the reality of the district as a result of COVID-19 has been the time. And when I say time, because I have such an outstanding team and we have such outstanding teachers and principals, our response and our rate of learning to implement this practice has moved so quickly that I've had time just to dig into practice, procedure, implementation, programming, allocations, and staffing. And I see so many opportunities to really accelerate the attainment of our outcomes that we collectively have spoke through here. So I am very much looking forward to solidifying and continuing to do this work to pull all of us together as an organization so our decisions are in the best interest of children, which support the members of the organization, which clearly define for everyone, regardless of where they read it or see it, that the process for making decisions within the school district of Indian River County, they follow a process where they hold themselves collectively accountable to their defined beliefs. And all decisions won't make all individuals happy, but the reality is, A, it will be understood. And decisions aren't things that are done in isolation or in a silo or behind some closed door, that they are openly discussed, debated, and you make those value-based judgments based on the best interest of children. So looking forward, I have a number of pages of notes, both in my PowerPoint here. My next steps to continue to synthesize this, refine this to a better place, and then bring it back to you in the coming weeks. We will initiate some organizational meetings regarding the structure of the plan. I think that is key in hearing from you. A great deal of my thoughts in the design of the plan seem to be aligning with yours, and looking forward to putting together a strategic plan that isn't just a replica of some other plan, but ultimately a uniquely designed plan that really looks at our goal over the course of 5 years and what we are to accomplish by unit or member of organization from year to year, and defining out goals and expectations from each year to ensure that we're benchmarking out the work that needs to be done to hit that 5-year goal. And I think a strategic plan that solely looks on a 5-year overarching goal is not specific enough to lead to daily action. But having a strategic plan that says in 5 years, this is where we want to be, absolutely. And this is the attainable outcome, and this is the goal that we know that we're going to get there. But being very specific over the course of a year regarding the action that needs to be done down to the school site level by who, and clearly defining the roles and responsibilities of every member of the organization will ensure that we are moving at a rate faster than other systems, both larger and smaller. And our opportunity to improve the quality of life for children in this district is significant. And when we say top 5, that is not an aspirational goal. That should be a reality that our parents demand from us and we provide for them. And I think our path to making that happen for our parents, for our students, begins with this plan that we're working on now. So thank you for your feedback. A lot to digest. I will be following up, already tasking out work as you were talking. So very, very excited to receive this feedback. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Did you have a last comment, Dr. Schiff?
Yes, thank you. Just quickly, I want to emphasize when you, Dr. Moore, talk about, that these are living, breathing statements and values. When we get to the point where we are clear exactly what these say, I would like to see them splattered, plastered all over the district. I want them on the wall behind our school board dais there. I want our beliefs, we believe that, to be on that wall. I want it on our stationery so that every time you see a document from the district, it reiterates. Right now it says, educate and inspire every student to be successful. Right. That doesn't inspire me. But when I hear these statements, when I talk about values, the way they live and breathe in this district is if they are inescapable. You see them when you walk in buildings. You see them every time we have a board meeting. Whenever there is a document from the district that comes out, it reiterates these things. So they become that thing that if you work in this district, you know that you are a piece of this, and you measure everything you do against these values and these beliefs. And if these values and these beliefs don't fit for you, then I invite you to consider that this may not be the best place for you. And we, when Mrs. Justice said that I talked about making adults comfortable, it's not about making them comfortable. This is not about comfort. This is about underlying support, moving forward, living and breathing, and that's not always comfortable. You said in one of your town halls, I think, and it's a statement I use often, and I don't remember exactly how you said it, but it was something to the effect of we have to be comfortable with discomfort, and we've become too comfortable, however that statement goes. I'm not about making people comfortable. I'm about engaging and moving us forward in ways that are exciting and innovative and energizing, and that's not always comfortable. Those are very different things. But I want to see these words everywhere. They will disappear if they live on documents that go in desks that nobody ever looks at. And I'm not interested in that. So as we move forward, as we refine this, I want us also to be thinking about how we absolutely saturate the district with these values, these beliefs, and the goals that are aligned with them. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Oh, did you have
No,
something else? Oh, Mrs. Rosario. Thought you were going to say something.
No.
Okay.
Hi. If I were sitting right next to Mara, I'd probably high five her right now.
Exactly.
If we go back to probably that first January or February, when I started talking about this and when we started bringing this up, at one meeting, I can't even remember when it was, I mentioned the idea of using our district strategic plan logo and the goals and the mission on letterhead and on email closings, on signature lines, things that were free, right? Things that were easy to do, things that wouldn't cost us at that time, things that wouldn't cost us. And I got pushback on it. I got a lot of pushback on, we can't really do that. And, it's like it's an issue to send out an email to encourage people to put it on their signature line. I just couldn't understand that. You know, I didn't feel that we should go in that direction. And if you look at my business card is the only business card that's different than my fellow board members, because I chose to put the strategic logo on there. Anyway, I totally agree with Dr. Schiff right now. I could not agree with her more, that not only does this have to be a living document, but it has to appear everywhere. It has to. Otherwise, it's just going to die away. And I think that the phrase that Dr. Moore, I don't know how my fellow board members feel about this, but the phrase that Dr. Moore has said since his interview up until now is one that I would like to publicly advocate it show up somewhere on our strategic plan, and it would be best by kids. Maybe even our first goal would be, instead of student focused, that it would be best by kids, or somewhere along the line, best by kids. It is a phrase that is catchy. It is one that each one of us has used, and we have at one point or another got it directly from Dr. Moore as he's leading our district in this, and we support him in excelling our district to be top 5. It is indeed accurate to say that every decision that we are making right now is best by kids. And that's the kind of flowing off of the tongue that the goals, the mission, the vision, all of that needs to flow from. So just food for thought. I don't know what any of you feel about that. But I saw Dr. Moore kind of smirk a little bit when I said that. But I honestly, I feel that. I feel like if you don't put it somewhere down, we're going to have to copyright it, because it is something that we ought to adopt. Best by kids. What do you all think?
Go for it.
We will digest. So, Madam Chair, that is my presentation. As I said, a great deal to digest and a great deal of work to do moving forward, to pull in all of this thinking to design a plan. In terms of branding and marketing, I could not agree more. In today's world, it has to be constant. It has to be clearly communicated. And if we're not consistently talking through these belief statements, our behaviors won't change. And I think if we do anything well, is being very strategic in how we market, how we campaign, not only in the development, but the consistency in messaging to accelerate the adoption and belief in our way of work. And sometimes it's really being forceful and saying, hey, we all do believe this, and let me lead by example. Let me just not talk about words. And the truth of the matter is, people buy in, they'll listen to you, but they're going to watch, and they're going to evaluate a leader, whether it be a school site principal or a superintendent, less on their words. And I know I use a lot of words, but make no mistakes about it. I know more than my words. My behaviors will lead people to change significantly faster than my words. I am clearly aware of that and willing to act upon what is in the absolute best interest of children. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Great workshop. Board members, we will return at 6 p.m. or 5:55 for the invocation, and that.
Just one else. Just when we return, board members, just remember we're going to be on the 6 p.m. Teams link, not this one.
Yes. All right. So we're going to call this meeting 3:27.